Yeah, so that's a raccoon in the yard. Yeah, don't worry, he's not getting in. But it's kind of funny because this brings me to a topic I was going to talk about today. Huh. And that is one of my favorite Beatles songs, Rocky Raccoon. Really underrated track. Yeah. Oh, there he goes. See if we can get him back. Well, he's leaving. As long as he doesn't chew through the AC cables. Hello, vinyl community. So, after that little raccoon introduction, that brings me on to a topic I've wanted to talk about. And that is ordering my favorite Beatles albums in order of worst to best. Now, this is just my personal opinion. It's not intended to be controversial. I think with most of the Beatles albums, you could legitimately make a case for them being number one, being your favorite. But yeah, let's get started with my list, with my favorites. So, just a couple of little notes. I only included Beatles albums that were released in the UK. So I did not include the Hey Jude album, and of course any of the Beatles 65 and etc., all the US albums. Didn't include any of those. We're also not including anything that was released after the Beatles split up. So no Red Album, no Blue Album, no Past Masters, no Live at the Hollywood Bowl, anything like that. I have included both Yellow Submarine and Magical Mystery Tour because although Magical Mystery Tour was only released as an EP in the UK and not an LP, for me it still counts because many of the better tracks were still available on the EP, and I think that it's legitimate to include Magical Mystery Tour. And in the Yellow Submarine, although it's not exactly an official Beatles album release, it was still released in the UK. The movie, of course, came out in the UK, and I will include that because it came out when the Beatles were still together. So having now kind of talked up Yellow Submarine, here it is in last place, occupying position number 13. Now, with any Beatles album, there's no such thing as a terrible Beatles album. Every Beatles album has at least several good tracks on it. Yellow Submarine is no exception. The artwork is fantastic, actually. I mean, look at that from the Yellow Submarine movie. That's just terrific. The big problem with this LP, for the most part, is side 2. And it's because side 2 does not consist of any Beatles tracks. It's solely George Martin orchestral songs. And they're not bad at all. That's not to say they're bad songs, but they're not Beatles songs. This does have 2 excellent tracks on it, in Hey Bulldog and It's All Too Much. It's All Too Much in particular is very underrated. And Hey Bulldog is just a fantastic sort of pop rock song. It also contains All You Need Is Love. Not one of my favorite Beatles songs, but I understand why some people like it. But there's just there's not enough good stuff on here, and again with side 2 not containing any Beatles tracks, this has to be in last place for me. Okay, in 12th position, Beatles for Sale. I always liked this album as a kid, and again, just to reiterate, there's no such thing as a terrible Beatles album. For most other bands, this would be a really solid effort. The problem with it is that the Beatles have so many better albums than this, and it also contains a lot of cover versions, including 1 or 2 not so great cover versions. Having said that, it has some decent songs like No Reply and I'll Follow the Sun. I think I remember George Martin saying that I'll Follow the Sun was his favorite track on the album. I also quite like I'm a Loser and Babies in Black. They're decent tracks. It also has the excellent 8 Days a Week on it. But it also has Everybody's Trying to Be My Baby, and it's kind of a throwaway track. I was never that crazy about Every Little Thing, or I Don't Want to Spoil the Party. There's a passable version of Rock and Roll Music on here, but it also has two terrible tracks, Mr. Moonlight and Kansas City, Hey 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 Hey. They're really not great, especially when you stack them up against other Beatles songs. But you know, the Beatles were jaded by this time. They'd been touring. There was a lot of pressure to put an album out for the Christmas of 1964. So it's understandable that it's maybe not one of their better efforts. So again, for me, this is number 12. And 11th spot with the Beatles. This was a little harder actually, because I do have a soft spot for this album. The artwork is iconic, of course. I mean, just look at it. It does have some good tracks on it. I'm very fond of this particular album because it's a UK edition, not a first pressing, it's a second pressing, but still sounds amazing. And it has some good tracks on it. We have It Won't Be Long, which is a decent track, and of course All My Loving, which is an amazing pop song. I'm also quite fond of Lennon's vocal on his cover version of Money. That's pretty good. And you know, it has McCartney singing a very nice Till There Was You, but it's also got like I Want to Be Your Man, which I know was a song that they actually gave to the Rolling Stones. Was the Rolling Stones' first hit. It's not a particularly great song. There's a reason why they gave it to the Stones instead of releasing it as a single themselves. It got A Little Child and Don't Bother Me, Not a Second Time, Devil in Her Heart. But of course, this is early Beatles, and in all of the early Beatles albums, you find a lot of cover songs. So yeah, it's a decent album. Just not one of the Beatles' better efforts, in my opinion. Okay, entering the top 10. Number 10, Let It Be. Let It Be is a curious album. Of course, for those of you who don't know, although it was released after Abbey Road, all of the songs were actually recorded before the Abbey Road songs for an aborted album that was going to be called Get Back. And it was a project that they just couldn't agree on the order of the tracks, and it got delayed and delayed again, and finally it was abandoned. But a lot of the songs ended up on the Let It Be album, and of course infamously produced by Phil Spector. This just about makes the top 10 because it has two of my favorite Beatles songs in the title track Let It Be and The Long and Winding Road. Let It Be, I think, is an absolute masterpiece. It's in my top 3 favorite Beatles songs. And The Long and Winding Road is a kind of a funny one for me because I never used to get it. I would read that people would say what a great track it was, and I'd listen to it, and for me it was a passable throwaway song. But I eventually made myself listen to it several times over and over again. And at some point I just got it, like it just clicked. And despite the fact that McCartney doesn't like all the orchestral stuff that's in it, I think it makes the song. I really do. It adds something to it. And I know you can get the Let It Be Naked album, which has the rawer, stripped down version of The Long and Winding Road, which was what McCartney originally intended. But you know, I think John Lennon was right in a sense. You know, he said that Phil Spector took like the shittiest tapes of half-finished songs and stuff that was a couple of years old, and he actually managed to make an album out of it. And in addition to that, we also have Across the Universe, which is a really lovely song by Lennon, and Get Back, which is It's a great track. I really like Get Back. You know, Billy Preston on keyboards. The reason why I cannot place this higher is because it's a very uneven album. Much like the White Album to a certain extent, you have highs and you have lows. So you've got the highs of like Across the Universe and Let It Be, but then we've got like Dig It and Maggie May, and it just sort of goes all over the place. So for that reason, I can't put it any higher than 10, but it does make the top 10 on the strength of a few tracks that are on it. Okay, number 9. Please Please Me, the Beatles' debut album. It's sort of a funny thing because in some ways it's not as good as one or two of the other albums that I've already covered. They're placed lower than this. But I've given this bonus points because it was their debut. And it's a pretty excellent debut album. You bear in mind that these songs were recorded in like 1962. And the album came out in what, 63, I think? Yeah. And it's got several really excellent tracks on it. I saw her standing there, you know, and Please Please Me, the title track, which was revolutionary for the time. It was a groundbreaking pop song. We also have the Beatles' first ever hit, Love Me Do, which only actually got to number 17 in the UK charts, but it was their first hit. And we have an amazing vocal by Lennon on Twist and Shout. Just, I don't know, I was going to use the word mesmerizing, maybe that's not correct, but you put it on, you just have to listen to it to the end. I mean, he really strains his vocal cords with it. And what's amazing is that they recorded this entire album in like a day, like 13 hours or something. Somebody can correct me on that, but I think it's something like that. And yeah, it's again for a debut album, it's really solid. It really is. Okay, that was what, number 9, right? Okay, number 8. Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band. This might be a little controversial because some people would put this in number 1. I understand that. For me, this has always been a little bit overrated. I can, you know, iconic artwork, which I'm going to repeat a few more times with some of the other albums. And it is a great album. It is. It's got some fantastic songs on it. But for me, I never quite got all the fawning over it. I understand it was groundbreaking. I understand it contains a day in the life, but ironically, A Day in the Life was not particularly appreciated when the album came out. It was only later that people started to really take more notice of that song. You know, it's a concept album that doesn't go anywhere for me in some respects. The first 2 tracks are all about Sgt. Pepper, and then apart from the reprise track near the end, there's nothing else about it. It feels like it was unfinished almost. You know, of course, it does have Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds on it, which is one of my favorite Beatles songs. Definitely a top 10 for me. I even like When I'm 64. I think that's a little bit of an underrated track. But for me, it doesn't have enough standout songs. You know, She's Leaving Home is very nice. Within You, Without You, I can see the sort of psychedelic, groundbreaking aspect of that. But for me, while a lot of other Beatles albums go up here, even if they sometimes dip, Sgt. Pepper always stays like here for me. You know, it's always somewhere in the middle, only very occasionally going a little bit higher. For a lot of bands, this would be their magnus opus. This would be an album that they would never better. And the thing is, again, that I think the Beatles did do better than Sgt. Pepper, and they did do better than it on numerous occasions. So for that reason, Sgt. Pepper has to be number 8. Okay, number 7, Magical Mystery Tour. My parents had the EP of this when I was a kid in England, and I loved it. I mean, it came with, you had 2 records, you had the booklet. Now, of course, you get the booklet in this too, and it's just a larger version, really, of the same thing. I was tempted to actually place this even higher because it I mean, look, Strawberry Fields Forever, Penny Lane, I Am the Walrus. Just for those three tracks alone, you kind of got to think about putting it higher, because those are three groundbreaking, amazing songs. To top it all off, okay, we've got All You Need Is Love. You know, again, not one of my favorite Beatles songs, but it was a pretty big hit. Hello Goodbye, which in some ways is a throwaway pop song, but it also shows McCartney's genius in simplicity, taking a simple song and making it into a huge hit. We also get Baby You're a Rich Man, which I like quite a lot too. The Fall on the Hill, which is sublime. Yeah, it's, you know, of course, look at the album artwork. I mean, that's just crazy. It's very much of its time, 1967, all the bright colors. You know, by this time it was well known that the Beatles were, you know, they like to partake during their recording sessions, and it shows. Okay, next up, that was what? Let's see, 10, 9, 8, 7. That was 7. Okay, so number 6, Help. I was tempted to put this in number 5. It was really close between this and the next album I'm going to show you. I think Help is a little bit of an underrated album. It has some amazing tracks on it, and the interesting thing about it is it's a real sort of segue between the Beatles' more traditional rock and roll roots from the early days into the more experimental stuff that started with Rubber Soul that came after Help. And indeed, a lot of the tracks were recorded almost in the same sessions, so much so that the lead track of the US version of Rubber Soul is I've Seen a Face, which of course is actually originally on the UK edition of Help, like it is with this one. But yeah, this has some great tracks on it. I mean, we've got the title track Help, terrific pop song. Lennon goes all Bob Dylan on us with You've Got to Hide Your Love Away, but it's a terrific song. Ticket to Ride is an amazing rock song. It was, for the time, it was almost as hard rock as rock could get. We also, of course, we have Yesterday on here. Come on, I mean, what is that? The most played song of all time or something? I think I once read that, or the most covered version, the most covered song of all time, something like that. And I mean, it's just got so many standout songs on it. And let's see what else. Oh, I knew there was one I was forgetting. The Night Before. The Night Before is a really underrated song. McCartney's vocals are absolutely out of this world on that song. And for any other artist, any other band, they could have had a smash hit with The Night Before. I mean, it could have been a sellout #1 the whole world over. Beatles didn't even release it. Actually, I think it might have been a B-side. I don't remember off the top of my head what it was a B-side to, but I think it was a B-side. So the only reason that Help doesn't quite make the top 5 for me is that it's not as groundbreaking as Rubber Soul would be after it. It's also not quite as groundbreaking as the album that I put at number 5, which is A Hard Day's Night. And this, again, iconic artwork, of course. This is a really groundbreaking album. And as a kid, I loved it. I thought this was the best Beatles album when I was a kid. But it's groundbreaking for a number of reasons. It's the first Beatles album where the Beatles wrote all the songs. And, of course, there was a movie of The Hard Day's Night, but in the UK, we didn't get the movie soundtrack like they did in the US, you know, with the red cover. Instead, we got the sort of, I don't know, original and best, in my opinion, version of it. But this has so many excellent tracks. I mean, A Hard Day's Night, Can't Buy Me Love, I Should Have Known Better, Anytime at All, I'll Be Back. Oh, and I Love Her, which is just a beautiful ballad by McCartney. And partly out of nostalgia, because I did love it so much as a kid, but also just trying to be objective about it, with how, again, how groundbreaking and what a landmark album this was for the time. It just didn't get any better than this. So that is my number 5. Okay, number 4, Rubber Soul. A lot of people would have put this at number 1. You'd be perfectly justified in doing so. The only reason it doesn't get to number 1 for me is that I think there's 3 better albums. It's as simple as that. I don't think this artwork is quite as iconic as some of their other albums. Even though it sort of was, for the time, you got this kind of weird fishbowl effect and the strange font with Rubber Soul. But what can I say? I mean, it is a superb album. It really is. You know, Drive My Car, Nowhere Man, Michelle. I mean, In My Life. Geez, I almost forgot about that. I mean, In My Life is a terrific song by Lennon. I'm Looking Through You, a little bit of an underrated song by McCartney there. Even like The Word is a great track. Norwegian Wood. And Girl. You know, Girl is a very clever song. Very cleverly done. So again, some people would have had this at number 1. I couldn't argue with that if you did. I really couldn't. It's just for me, again, we got 3 better ones, 3 better albums. Number 3, Abbey Road. Could have easily been my top pick. I do think that this is the most complete album. It's the most polished album, for sure. You know, they kind of got together and in 60, well, it was released in 69. I think some of the tracks were recorded in 68, but they got together for kind of one last hurrah, one last crack at it to make their masterpiece. And in many ways they achieved it. There's not really anything bad to say about the album. The worst parts are probably the sort of Me, Mr. Mustard, Polythene Pam segment on side 2. But seeing how that's followed by the whole Abbey Road Suite, as it's the medley as it's become known, it's kind of hard to even knock that. What more can you say about the album artwork that hasn't been said? I've actually been to Abbey Road. It's interesting. There's a camera there that takes a photo, like a webcam, and you can go and look online later on and find yourself. You know, you look for the time of day that you were there, and you could find yourself walking across. It was really busy though. A lot of tourists there. A lot of tourists. But the Abbey Road studios are like right here. I think they're slightly further back, like in here somewhere. And you can, I mean, you can't go up to the door, but you can look through the fence at Abbey Road. Yeah, I mean, so many great tracks on it come together. Oh Darling is a personal favorite of mine. Again, the Abbey Road medley, Something. Here Comes the Sun. George Harrison by this time was in top form as well. Okay, number 2. I almost put this at number 1. I did. I came close to it. But Revolver, number 2. One of the most famous landmark albums of all time. This is a US pressing. I do have a mono remaster with the UK track listing as well. This has so many amazing songs on it. I mean, and again, I keep using the word groundbreaking, but it really was. Tomorrow Never Knows. Come on. Eleanor Rigby. Taxman is an amazing track. Got to Get You Into My Life is one of my personal favorites as well. I'm Only Sleeping, For No One. I mean, it just goes on and on. The artwork, again, what more can you say that hasn't already been said? The artwork's just amazing. And I wish I had a UK first pressing of this. I really do. This is a US pressing. It's not even a first pressing, actually. This is a late 60s or early 70s pressing. But it actually sounds amazing. It really does. I came close to putting this at number 1. I did come close to it. But at number 1, of course, that means we have the White Album. And this may be a little controversial, although some people, I have heard other people say this is their favorite Beatles album. And some people even say how amazing the artwork is. It's not for me. I know you just, I never really got the artwork for this, you know, the slightly embossed, the Beatles lettering, which you can't even really see right here. I get it that the serial numbers were kind of cool and all that. This is an uneven album. It is, and even though it's my favorite Beatles album, I do acknowledge how uneven it is. You have a couple of really, really deep, deep lows, but a lot of spectacular highs. You know, we of course, let's talk about Revolution #9. I don't get it. I never did get it. I don't regard it as being some avant-garde piece of art. It's to me, it's nonsense. It really is. It's Lennon going one step too far and trying to get away with something that he shouldn't have tried to get away with. And then we've got sort of like Wild Honey Pie, Why Don't We Do It in the Road, which are kind of low points as well. But on the plus side, we have some amazing high points for this album. Helter Skelter is one of my favorite Beatles songs of all time. I think it's an absolute masterpiece. I really do. We also have Happiness is a Warm Gun, which is just again, it's a masterpiece. Lennon this time in top form. We also have Back in the USSR, which I mean, can you really think of any other better tracks that have opened albums? Not just the Beatles, but of any other artist. And it's lyrically so clever. And then we have While My Guitar Gently Weeps, which in a way is kind of the jewel that shines out from this album. For me, that was Harrison's best ever song, not just during his time with the Beatles, but during his whole solo career, and you know, Traveling Wilburys too, and all that. It's just an immaculate song. It really is. And then we've also got this kind of brings me full circle, Rocky Raccoon. It's funny because I wanted to talk about that track in particular on this and what an underrated song it is. And it's just a coincidence that I happened to find a raccoon wandering around just a few minutes ago. But Rocky Raccoon is a very cleverly worded, beautifully written song by McCartney. It's very clever lyrics. And it's sort of an unusual tune too. I can't think of too many other Beatles songs that are like it in some respects. But it's always been one of my favorites. It's easily in my top 10 favorite Beatles songs, Rocky Raccoon. I don't know, I just always liked it. I really did. Call me crazy. But and yeah, I mean, and even some of the more throwaway songs in this, like Birthday, it's still got a great guitar riff to it. It really does. So for me, the White Album gets to #1 on the strength of the fact that it has so many high points to it, just for my personal taste. I know some of you guys will disagree. Some of you will say, well, Abbey Road should have been #1. Some will say Rubber Soul. Some will say Revolver. Some will say Sgt. Pepper. Totally legitimate viewpoints. Absolutely. There's no such thing as a bad Beatles album. Not even Yellow Submarine. Not quite. But for me, this was always the album that I liked the most. My parents had it when I was a kid. I played it to death. And you know, my parents actually had most of the Beatles albums. The only one I can remember for sure that they didn't have was Help. And I played those things to death, and which is really sad looking back on it, because they were probably UK first pressings, all of them. And don't you sometimes wish you had a time machine, you could go back in time and snatch those records away from your 8-year-old self or 6-year-old self, however old I was. But yeah, I played this album to death as a kid. It still kind of holds a special place for me, and for that reason, it's #1. This is my favorite Beatles album of all time. Not just because of Rocky Raccoon. Alright guys, well thanks for watching. And as always, if you'd like to leave any comments, please tell me your favorite albums. Maybe give me your top 5 favorite Beatles albums. You don't have to list all of them, just like the top 3 or top 5. And yeah, I'd be interested to read your comments. So, alright, as always, thanks for watching everyone. Bye-bye.